Majora's Mask is a really special game to me. It was the first Zelda game I really played. Opening up the door to Clocktown was magical for me as a kid. Going and meeting the campy townsfolk, getting new bubble powers, convincing Anju that you do, in fact, have a reservation for this hotel. The minute I started playing around, my brain chemistry changed immediately. Every weekend, I would go spend $5 to go to the video store, explore more of the town, and if I was feeling brave, maybe even explore a dungeon. Even as newer games came out to play, I kept finding myself back at the same shelf, buying this weird little game. Keep in mind, I hadn't even played Ocarina of Time yet. Something about this game, well, it was special. And I want to take this time with you to parse out why I think this game sets itself so far apart from other games of its time. The first thing I want to talk about is the gameplay. It's your basic Z targeting fare that was standard for Zelda games up until about Skyward Sword. Exploration in Majora's Mask is much more condensed than its older brother. The Hyrule field of Ocarina of Time was large, expansive, if a little empty when it came to discovery. Majora's Mask opts for a more condensed, small, and surprisingly linear experience. Clocktown sits at the center with 4 zones that can be accessed via gates to Termina Field along its compass points, with the added twist that each zone changes after you complete its dungeon. The plus side of this design choice is that exploration is very rewarding, and those rewards come quite frequently. Now that being said, Termina is very small. Each zone feels more like a series of tubes rather than a world to explore, which can be additionally frustrating considering that there are only 4 dungeons with 5 bosses in the entire game. Ocarina of Time had, 12? At least there are a lot of side quests to do to balance this out. I don't mind this design choice as much, since all of the characters are an absolute treat to interact with. I mean, look at this guy. He's just a little guy. Pepper in the fact that this is the only main title game where you can play as the other major races in the Zelda universe. Deku, Goron, Zora. These points alone make this a worthwhile entry into the Zelda series. But what really sets this game apart is the story and deeper themes. And that is what I want to discuss with all of you today. Majora's Mask has been considered the red-headed stepchild to the Chad older brother of Ocarina of Time. Honestly, I would rank Ocarina of Time at or above Majora's Mask in all the aspects that I've already discussed. But when it comes to story, Majora's Mask leads by a mile. The basic plot is Link gets lost in the Lost Forest, go figure, and stumbles into a fanfiction version of Hyrule. Now the moon is mad and about to destroy all the people in Termina if Link doesn't steal a mask from a lonely child. Memes aside, I do really love the story. To give a real plot synopsis, time has passed since the ending of Ocarina of Time. Link, in an effort to find his lost friend Navi, has traveled deep into the Lost Forest. Along the way, he is ambushed by the Skull Kid and his fairy companions, robbed of his ocarina, and cursed to become a mere Deku child. Teaming up with Tattle, who has been left behind by the Skull Kid, Link has only 3 days to reclaim his body and stop the Skull Kid from crashing the moon into Termina. What I love about Majora's Mask is the story is so clear and easy to follow, and yet you can spend hours thinking about the meanings and implications of the story. It's been a going theory in the fandom that the overarching theme of Majora's Mask is the stages of grief and death. but I think we can expand on that just a little more. Briefly, each compass point area represents a stage of grief. Denial is represented by Clocktown through its people, who become increasingly dense about the very obvious fact that anger. The Deku King is driven to kill an innocent monkey over very little evidence that this monkey kidnapped his daughter. It's very violent, even for Zelda standards. Bargaining. Darmani must make peace with the fact that he is dead and Link cannot restore him to life. Depression. Lulu, Mikau's significant other, is left in a vegetative state after a mysterious laying of eggs. She's left to stare out at the sea, waiting for her hero to return. And finally, acceptance. Link exercises spirits as he journeys through Icona, allowing them to pass on, which aids in the greater metaphor of moving on and accepting our grief. This is a massive overview of the theory, but if you're interested, I recommend watching a few of the other retrospectives here on YouTube. They are fantastic and go into a ton of detail on this. However, I want to focus on the last stage of grief. I feel this is often overlooked when analyzing Majora's Mask on the whole. Acceptance is in every facet of the story and lore of this game. Link and his entire journey represent the human capacity to persevere, accept loss, and begin again. Now, I could talk for hours on this, but since I barely know how to edit as is, I'm going to keep my analysis to a few major examples to keep this video at, let's say, 10 minutes. And what better place to start with the not-so-titular character. Link's journey starts very unconventionally. Cursed as a Deku Scrub, you quickly realize you have no way to fight, no way to travel outside, no way to revert back to your normal self, and no way to help anyone around you. You can only watch helplessly as people lose hope. But I always wondered why. Why start the game this way? Most Zelda titles start with Link beginning in a whimsical, isolated land, learning the ropes of combat, and preparing to take on the big bad that waits out in the unknown. Some of the most well-known titles, however, begin with death. In A Link to the Past, Link begins his journey with his uncle passing on his sword to him with his dying breath. Luckily, he is resurrected at the end of the game, but in other titles, death is more permanent. In Ocarina of Time, the game begins with Link in his isolated Kokiri village, answering a summons from the Great Deku Tree. As you gather your equipment for the journey, your tribe is left excited, and in some cases, jealous, of your meeting with their beloved Deku Tree. He is their leader, their protector, their father. When Link meets the Great Deku Tree, he is sick, dying, pleading for Link to go and quell the darkness within him. Link is met with the spider monster Goma and her Deku Scrub minions. Link is able to slay these beasts, but he is too late to save him. The darkness took hold of the tree a long time ago. This was only a test to ensure Link was up to the journey ahead of him. Link stands there in silence as the Deku Tree gives his final words of wisdom and leaves the fate of the world to this young boy. Link is your classic silent protagonist throughout these N64 entries. We never really get a sense of how he feels after this. From a gameplay perspective, You're quickly pushed to leave Kokiri Forest after this event. But how would you feel if your father passed away right in front of you? Would you feel guilt? Shame? Powerlessness? When Link is first transformed by the Skull Kid, he is shown visions of endless Deku Scrubs following him, their iconic swishing sound haunting him as he runs away, morphing him into the very species that killed his father. His very feelings of grief and anguish now branded on his skin. And then, Link must begin his journey. Just a child with no weapons, no magic, and no prestige. Just a lost boy in a strange world. But Link perseveres. Through the power of his friends, through Zelda's protection, and his own determination, he is able to reclaim his body, and through this act, healing his grief. But what happens when you truly feel alone in your darkest moment? When there is no one there to lean on, to talk to help you out when you're at your lowest? And that brings us to Skull Kid. We first meet Skull Kid in Ocarina of Time. He's a precocious forest dweller that loves to play his flute. You can make him a fast friend by playing Saria's song. But beyond that, there really isn't much lore. When we meet him again in Majora's Mask, however, the fun-loving prankster has been turned into a mean-spirited, sadistic imp ready to hurt anyone for the pleasure of it, even his friends. So, what changed? Well, sure, the mask is controlling Skull Kid, but these impulses and emotions came from somewhere. If you go to Stockpot Inn towards the back, you can meet a kindly grandmother. She can read 3 stories to you, the longest story being the story of the 4 giants. Long ago, the people of Termina lived in a single world, united and blessed by the 4 giants living among them. It was during this time that the giants befriended a small imp, the Skull Kid. However, there came a time when the 4 giants decided to guard and protect the people while dormant. With the world of Termina now split into 4 parts by the order of the 4 giants, each of the giants took 100 steps toward their respective regions, telling their people that if trouble should befall them, they should call them in a loud voice declaring their predicament. This way, their pleas would carry to them. The 4 giants would come to their aid. However, the small imp, who had been friends with the giants even before they had created the 4 worlds, became afflicted with their decision, and was woefully stricken by their departure. The imp misinterpreted the giants' actions, and, feeling neglected and lonely, he began to spread his anger and frustration throughout all of Termina. Devastated with misery due to the imp's malicious tricks, the people pleaded with the giants for their aid. Angered, the 4 giants, who were still the protectors of the people, ordered the imp to leave the 4 worlds and return to the heavens. Otherwise, the imp would be destroyed by the might of the giants. Frightened and surprised by his friend's actions, the imp left the lands for the heavens, and peace and tranquility returned to Termina. Grief, when suffered alone, is poison to the mind. A lost child banished from his home, left to wander the world alone. Skull Kid acts as a dark reflection to Link's own journey as he left Kokiri Forest to stop Ganon. But Skull Kid has no one rooting for him back home. only memories of broken bonds, left to pull pranks to get attention from the people he is invisible to vent his sadness and frustration. Once he dons the Majora's Mask, these emotions become magnified, turning his pranks into something much darker. His alienation and sadness turns into a compulsion to hurt and subjugate anyone around him. Yet, even at his worst, his friends didn't give up on him. When he is freed from Majora's grasp, he reunites with his friends, if only briefly. He is left to face the giants, and the reality that while they love him, they cannot stay in his life. Skull Kid learns to let go of the giants, and in doing so, moves on with his life, making a new friend, a child he played a tune with long ago. This theme goes beyond characters in Majora's Mask. The theme is baked into the very setting of the game. I want to specifically talk about the curse of Ikana Canyon. This desert land has been locked in stasis for a long time. Most of the architecture and history has been eroded away by war and time. The war between the Garo and the Ikanan royals has raged long beyond their lives. It's the only thing people can remember about Ikana. Their very souls chained to the land by the blood that has spilled. Hardened warriors, once emboldened by the cause, by either defending their land or taking it, now all have the same goal: to rest. Ikana Canyon stands out as an antithesis to the theme of acceptance. It is a desert devoid of life. Ghosts living there wallow in their misery and grief, holding on to what little they have left of a life gone by. Stuck in a cycle. Link can't really fix these issues. The war is over. The kingdom has fallen. The ghosts keep marching even as their goals become more pointless. And yet, it is the hope that Link gives these spirits that allow them to break their cycles. That their men will be taken care of. That their message will be passed on. That their mistakes will be corrected, just as Link had done before. Grief can be devastating, but it can be devious as well. It can follow you for such a long time you find yourself spending days just trying to survive. For me, in those moments, it's hope that gets me through. That better days will be ahead. That life will grow again. So, why did I want to talk about this? Talking about Zelda is nothing new. The theories and discourse around this game have long since run their course. Well, beyond this being one of my favorite games of all time, it holds a special place in my heart. I've loved video games since I could hold a controller. Getting an N64 on my birthday is still a core memory for me. This game came out as many not-so-great things were happening in my life. Unavoidable changes, passings in my family, life feeling vaguely unfamiliar. Majora's Mask was one of the first pieces of media that helped me process these difficult emotions. Helped me move forward when my life felt crushing. I think we all have some show or movie or something else from our childhood that has done much the same thing. Growing up can be painful. It can be confusing and overwhelming. Stories like these are so special because they empower us to face our demons at our most vulnerable. People are always going to need stories like these, and the video game medium is so powerful to tell them. Majora's Mask has laid the bedrock for a plethora of games with their own challenging stories of inner struggle and grief. It's a trend I hope continues on so younger generations can find solace in new games. Games that they can look up to when the world feels like it's coming to an end.